Hey there YouTubers, this is my 2014 Trek FX 7.3. I bought this bike new 11 years ago and I have been riding it ever since. I have put a few thousand miles on it and I've been maintaining it myself all these years. I have made many updates to this bike to make it more comfortable and useful for my commutes. Join me as I do a full cleanup and re-lube, just as I've done many times in the past. We start off by removing the chain. I have a missing link installed, so it's very easy to detach and reattach my chain. I'll go ahead and place my chain into this container for cleaning. To remove the rear wheel, we'll first need to undo the brakes. We will go ahead and remove the skewer from the rear wheel. The skewer has two springs, as you can see here. These springs are easy to lose, so I'm going to keep it all assembled together like this for now. And use the cassette remover and the chain whip tool to loosen the cassette. Since we have a free wheel here, we cannot just turn and loosen the cassette, since the whole thing turns together. So we will position the chain whip tool to provide a counter resistance and free the cassette. My 9-speed cassette comes apart into multiple pieces. I'll make sure that I don't lose any of these smaller pieces. I'll go ahead and place them into a container along with all the other rear wheel parts. Now I'll flip the whole wheel around. We need to unlock this axle nut. To do this, I will use this special very thin wrench, size 15 in this case, along with this adjustable wrench. We simply twist the two nuts apart and unlock them from each other. By the way, almost all of my tools are from the bicycle toolkit I got a long time ago. I'll have a link to a very similar toolkit from the same brand in the description of this video. These are affiliate links and they help me earn a small percent from each purchase made. Thanks for your support. Okay, let's continue on. With an axle removed, I can now remove the protective cover from over the bearings. I'll go ahead and remove the bearings as well. I have seen others using a genius method of using a magnet pen to remove the bearings easily, but unfortunately, I don't have one of those at this time. And now the other side. The cover on this side is a little harder to remove. I'll have to use a piece of cloth to protect my wheel hub while I pry it up from underneath with a flathead screwdriver. With all the bearings removed and everything cleaned, I'll examine the race where the bearings roll around for any damage. Sometimes bikes that do not get serviced for a long time and the grease has been compromised, the race will get damaged with pitting. But as you can see, this race here looks nice and smooth. Also, don't forget to check the race on the axle as well. Alright, let's move on to the front wheel. I'll go ahead and undo the brakes there and loosen the skewer to allow the wheel to drop out. We should make sure that we don't lose any of our springs on the skewers. I'll remove these rubber protectors from the axle nuts. And once again, I'll use one of my special thin wrenches, size 13, for the front wheel. I'll position the two wrenches so that I can easily press them together to unlock the nuts, until it's loose enough to unscrew them by hand. I only unlock one side so that when it's time to put it back, I won't need to realign things onto the axle. And again, we will carefully pry up the bearing protector. This part is a bit flimsy and bends easily, so we'll need to be careful. With the bearing removed and the race clean, I can examine for any damages. I don't need to remove the whole rear derailleur, however, I'll remove the two pulleys for cleaning. I just need to loosen them with a hex wrench and try to carefully remove all the pieces without losing any of them. Dirt will often get between the pulley and the metal washers, causing friction and additional wear and tear. With both pulleys removed, one side of the cage also comes out. I'll go ahead and examine the tensions of the derailleur and make sure it's nice and snappy and not worn out. I move each and every movable pivot point to make sure it's smooth and springy. I'm going to use some of this tenacious oil to keep things lubricated and keep my derailleur as frictionless as possible. Alright, let's move on to the crank and front derailleur area. To clean my crank and front derailleur area, I start by making sure my pedals spin smoothly. I'm going to remove the crankset for a nice cleaning. I'll do this by unscrewing the crank bolt from the chain side. This takes a hex wrench. These bolts have a special rubber grommet so that water and dirt do not get inside and cause rusting. These inner threads are very important, since that's what I'm going to use with this crank puller tool. I have a few of them here, and I want to make sure I choose one that is not worn out and fits nicely and snugly into these threads. If they are not sitting tightly and all the way in, the threads will end up getting damaged. Now that the crank puller tool is all the way in and tightened down, I'll need a nice hefty wrench like this one. The long handle of this wrench gives me a good amount of leverage to force the crank out. Alright, let's take a look at the crankset. I'm paying close attention to the chain rings. They are very dirty, but it's important to make sure that they are not overly worn out or damaged. I think they look fine and I have not had my chain slip or anything like that. I'm going to go ahead and place the whole thing into this wide blue bucket for cleaning. I'm using a bicycle cleaning fluid, but really, dish soap of any kind will work as well. I want to scrub all the dirt and grime off of it. I'm also going to be cleaning all the other parts I have removed from the bike so far. I'll be using a brush and soap to clean all of it. For the chain, I'll use a chain degreaser. Okay, all the parts have been cleaned and are now ready to be reassembled. And the chain is also nice and clean now, but it'll need to be re-lubed after installing it. Alright, I'll start off with the rear derailleur. I'm going to go ahead and install the pulleys back into place. They are spinning nice and freely. Next, I'll move on to the crankset. I'm going to apply a bit of grease to the square tapers of the bottom bracket. This will help me easily remove my crankset again in the future. And of course, to hold it all together, we will go ahead and install a crank bolt back in. I'll start it off by hand, however, I'll be using a torque wrench to make sure I have sufficiently tightened them down. I have fitted my torque wrench with various adapters so that it fits the crank bolt. I have set it to around 50 Newton meters as specified for this square taper crankset type. It takes quite a lot of power and leverage to get this to click. And now, the next side. I have it greased up again, and I'll go ahead and once again use my torque wrench. I had previously taken off this pedal. It's the right side pedal and it'll screw in counterclockwise. I'll apply some grease onto the threads here as well. This will help me remove the pedal easily in the future. I'll use one of my thin bicycle wrenches to go ahead and spin the pedal back into place. Alright, before I can reassemble the wheel hubs, I'll need to either clean and reuse the bearings or just put new ones in. I'll go ahead and put new ones, but first I'll use my measuring tool to find out the size they are. The rear wheel bearings are 1/4 inch and the front is 3/16. I've got a whole collection of different size bearings really cheap online a while back. I've been using these bearings for a long time now. They are really good. So we will first apply some grease onto the bearing race. Then I'll go ahead and place the bearings inside. Because of the grease, they get held into place nicely while I continue to assemble. Next up, I'll go ahead and push this bearing cover back into place. I'll put the axle and flip the whole thing around to work on the other side next. With both bearing covers in place, I'll tighten down the axle. I'll go ahead and place the spacer into the side without the cassette and begin tightening down the lock nut. So this part is a little bit of fun. We need to tighten it down just enough for the bearings to spin smoothly, but also for the axle not to be too loose and wiggle around. It usually takes a few tries before I can accomplish this balance. Tightening down the lock nut sometimes also knocks the balance off again and I have to start over. So with the axle locked down, next up we will go ahead and slide in the cassette. There are notches that help guide you place it in correctly. We need to make sure each piece goes in order. And finally, it's time to tighten it down. For this, I'll use my cassette tool and tighten it down clockwise. Next, we will put the rear wheel back into place. Oops, I forgot to put in the skewer beforehand. I'll just go ahead and slip it into the wheel hub now. We just need to make sure the skewer springs are in place on both sides of the skewer and tighten the nut from the other side. We're almost there. Next up, we'll go ahead and put the chain back into place. I'll guide it along the chain rings and the pulleys. Then bring the chain together and hook it together using the master link, also referred to the missing link. Of course, off camera at a later time, I went ahead and re-lubed the chain. Finally, the last step is to put the front wheel back on. Now I'll go for a quick ride around the city. I'll enjoy the fresh air and the smooth feeling bicycle. Thanks for watching all the way through, and please feel free to check out my affiliate links in the description of this video. Each purchase my viewers make through my links get me a small commission. It really helps me put the time and effort into making future videos for all you guys. And of course, please help my channel out by liking and subscribing for more helpful content like this.